welcome back to the channel, lads and ladies, and welcome to the next Pathfinder log. So, we left off last time with leaving off on the last campaign, starting a break in that story, all of which you can watch the other Pathfinder logs to find out where that left off. And starting last week and culminating in today, or tonight, Monday morning if you will, I drank a Monster Energy, so I'm too awake to go to sleep when I should. And in the wee hours of the morning, here I am recording the next Pathfinder log. This time, I'm the DM, and Sam and David are playing characters. David's character, a fairly straightforward monk character, with some exceptions that I'll be talking about in a bit. And Sam's character, a vampiric bloodline sorcerer, with again some special aspects to their characters that I'll describe shortly. The world is essentially similar to the world of Full Metal Alchemist. The idea is alchemy is very strong in the particular area where David and Sam are starting out, and their magic in its other forms is extremely rare. Outside the land that David and Sam are starting, the world is pretty mundane, so fairly similar to 1938 world of our world. So that's the setting we're looking at, and sort of in between World War I and World War II in terms of technology. The conditions of the world are not going to match up with real world history because I can't be bothered to really dig into researching those things. I'd like some wiggle room when it comes to storytelling with this one. And the premise behind this campaign is basically that the characters that Sam and David are playing are going to be homunculi. What is a homunculus? You see that? The plural is homunculi. The singular is homunculus. A homunculus is essentially an artificial life form. The goal with creating a homunculus is to create life from naturally non-living components. So an alchemical robot would be the idea, and the ultimate goal is to create a higher form of life. And that is the project, long ongoing, bearing fruit now in the form of these third generation homunculi who are capable of very closely imitating genuine life. And the catch is that as part of this process of imitating the living, these homunculi drain the life from the things that they are copying to a certain extent, almost as a form of like a vampire of sorts, life-sucking, soul-sucking. And this would be something that takes place just passively in a barely noticeable way, and it would take months for something like consciousness to be developed by one of these homunculi at the cost of the consciousness of whatever creature that they've been vamping off of. So that's the backstory, and as far as game mechanics, Sam and David's characters are going to be with the homunculus, what's it called? Formula is not the right word, but it's like a little set of features you tack on to whatever you've created. Template, that's right. The homunculus template, which is something that I looked up It's basically similar to being a golem. So as a non-living creature, they don't have to do things like eat or breathe, and things like hot temperatures and cold temperatures don't really bother them so much, and they're a bit tougher. Their armor class is higher than normal, and they even have damage reduction because they're made of sturdier things than flesh and bone, and their vital components aren't quite so exposed or vulnerable as ordinary organs would be. So, they get some nice bonuses starting out, and they also, this is something that I decided to include, they get a full BAB. So, in terms of Pathfinder, a fighter has the best chance to hit something at his level, and compared with, say, a cleric or a druid or a rogue, they get what's called a medium BAB, basically 2/3 as good as what a fighter gets, and everybody who's not well trained in the martial arts ends up with a low BAB progression, which is roughly half, well, it's exactly half of the ability that a fighter has. So they get a full BAB regardless of their class as part of being a homunculus. So that's pretty neat as well. Frees them up to do some ridiculous things with their character design, and that's something that I was looking forward to. Now again, this is homebrew, this is just for funsies, these are overpowered characters, and we're going to put them into some ridiculous situations and just see what they do. So, last Sunday, David and Sam made their characters, and a good portion of the time that night was spent just building the characters and get everything lined out, and then we had them meet each other. So, David's character, again, fairly straightforward. He appears human. He's an officer in the military, and he is, in terms of character levels, a monk level 1. So he's very well trained in unarmed combat. He got the typical training of an officer in the military, and he ended up taking the place of someone who was intended to control what are basically in this world known as combat dolls. Essentially, again, robots. These homunculi who are very simple and don't have the ability to achieve sentience. Basically, they're commanded as though they're robots, and these officers in the military train for months alongside their first combat doll, and the doll actually takes on the appearance and the character of that officer in training as they wither away. That is the story of how David's character was made, a third-generation homunculus who took over the life of a young officer cadet recruit. His first mission: there are reports of a demon goat from hell, spawn of Satan itself, that is terrorizing a small village nearby. That's Sam's character. Sam wanted to be a goat. So, whereas David's character replaced someone who would have been an up-and-comer in society, a human being with rank in the military, Sam's character is a goat, a prize-winning goat. In terms of Pathfinder, a dire goat, which is actually a thing. There are stats for a dire goat, and that is exactly what Sam is. He has a ridiculous name for his character. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I think his goal is to be worshipped. We'll see how that works out. So that was the short version of the first night's business. David's character was assigned to deal with this demon goat. He meets Sam's character, the goat, who was in the middle of the village general store, just munching away on whatever he felt like because he's scared. He had scared off all of the townsfolk who decided to be in a different area than whatever the hell that thing is. And they meet up, and then they got attacked by, I think it was 5 dire wolves in terms of Pathfinder rules, but these were not ordinary dire wolves. For the purposes of the story, they were a type of homunculus that turns essentially into a monster. And this is sort of where Sam is heading with his character, but his is a bit more complicated than these ravenous beasts. And they had sensed the presence of homunculi and closed in for the attack. They get attacked by 5 dire wolves. David had been issued, as part of his equipment for this mission, 5 scout class combat dolls, so these are fairly useless in terms of dealing damage in a fight, but they were equipped with some standard gear and had the ability to soak some damage, because I felt like sending a larger number of monsters against Sam and David than just having 1 or 2, just because that's how I felt like balancing things. So I sent those extra combat dolls along with David's character to see what he would do with them and to see how that would affect the combat in terms of balancing the game. And I liked the effect that it had. Because David and Sam are playing overpowered low-level characters, it makes sense to throw a larger number of low-level enemies against them, because then things will work out a little bit better than trying to find some higher challenge rating creature that might be too strong for them or would be just totally underpowered, and, well, then what are you gonna do? So, in terms of Pathfinder, these combat dolls were extremely simple creatures. They were very simple in terms of their stats, and as I mentioned, they didn't have a huge amount of ability to cause damage on their own, but at least they could absorb a hit or 2, and that is indeed what they did. At the end of the combat with the 5 dire wolves, Sam and David's character had shown themselves to be fairly strong in combat for level 1, and I think 3 out of the 5 combat dolls ended up getting scrapped. So that'll go in the after action report, I'm sure. They found some interesting evidence among the creatures that started to dissolve and gooify as soon as they were destroyed, and headed back to report in about what had happened. Sam's demon goat, or homunculus goat homunculus, now accompanying David, and that ended the night's activities. We reconvene a week later, tonight, and Sam and David have been reassigned to because I didn't want to deal with like actual military stuff, so I put them in the Special Forces. I assigned them to the Signal Corps, which is not actually the Signal Corps. They will be given a mission. They will be given some resources and freedom to do things as they wish to accomplish the mission, and as far as their nation is concerned, they never left the office. So their activities are entirely in secret, and they're expected to get results. Well, in tonight's activities, they definitely got some results. So their mission is that in this far-off sort of Mideast, we'll call it a trading post. It was called like Shariz al-Baz or something like that. Some made-up name that I gave it. Baz al-Shariz, something like that. There are roughly 3,000 disgruntled, angry locals formed into a roughly cohesive war band that have surrounded this trading post of the nation of Britannia. The Britannian trading post, staffed by roughly 600 fighting men, along with merchants and traders and civilians of different stripes, are quite nervous about the hostile forces that are basically holding them ransom, and before this trade dispute turns into all-out warfare, the military has been assigned the task of defusing the situation. These two fresh faces in the Signal Corps, one of them an officer, the other a goat. It's better not to ask too many questions. Have been assigned clandestinely to deal with the situation or to help with the situation to the best of their ability. Sam and David arrive at a major port town in the area of where they need to be. In fact, about 200 miles coastward of where they'll have to go. Baz al-Shari is 200 miles inland, and here they are at the coast. They purchase and requisition some supplies that they've been provided the opportunity to acquire. A jeep, 50 sticks of dynamite, some neurotoxin, plenty of doses, labeled rat poison, 25 4-ounce containers, glass canisters filled with neutral oil surrounding roughly 4 ounces of white phosphorus, among other things that they decided to bring with them. 1940s technology is fun. So we'll see what they end up doing with all that equipment. Their guide, Hakim, has been acquired as well, an NPC contractor known for his discretion, his knowledge of the area, the fact that he's not a local, and he has 13 daughters to support, so he's interested in being well compensated, and his ability to deal with, well, things like translation, local knowledge, dealing with the locals. Nothing to do with combat, though, mind you. Hakim tends to disappear long before the bullets start to fly. He has a good sense for those things. The first night, Sam decides to be an actual billy goat and start bothering the NPC. First, he tries to intimidate and does a little headbutting attack against Hakim, and Hakim tells him that if he's going to be an evil little bastard, he's going to have to find another NPC to help him around. So, refusing to be bullied, he's earned the respect of Sam's character, I suppose. And then Sam did a little bit more of messing around with the NPC, and then they got back to the task of heading down the road toward where they need to be. The first day they traveled in the open through the heat of the day, and we're dealing with a hot mid-east country in the middle of the hot season, so they were the only ones traveling during the heat of the day. Everyone else sort of shocked at them, and anyone who looked closely a bit terrified and awed at the same time, as what appears to be a prize-winning goat, and what for all intents and purposes looks like a Britannian male young man in a captain's uniform, not sweating or showing signs of discomfort in the extreme heat. Maybe they raised some eyebrows that first day, I'm thinking. From then on, they decide to travel in the cool part of the evening and night and sleep during the hot part of the day. After getting, we'll say roughly halfway to their destination, they come to what is clearly, you could call it a security checkpoint, you could call it a shakedown, a shakedown, as the local warlords' bands are fleecing passers-by and checking to make sure that, well, no unwanted international presence makes their way up the road. Roughly over a dozen of these potentially hostile natives have set up this checkpoint. There is a clearly upset Britannian woman who looks like a young middle-aged school teacher who has been detained, locals passing through, others paying their way, and anyone who appears to be Britannian being detained. The guards, what are they called? The war band, I guess? Mountain Blade, anyone? On noticing David's jeep start to form into an ambush formation, a C-shaped ambush, if you're wondering, readying their black powder rifles and their crude, medieval style melee weapons. David is ready for combat. Meanwhile, Sam's character, who is, for all intents and purposes, to an outside observer, a goat, carried a satchel up to the tent where the majority of these enemy irregular soldiers were trying to relax while two men were doing most of the work during their time. And he had just dropped a satchel that contained 5 of the sticks of dynamite. While no one was paying attention to him, he grabbed a telephone wire from their supplies, dragged it to the explosives, plugged it into a detonator, and waited for things to go hot. As soon as it was obvious that combat was going to happen if they were going to get through this checkpoint, or if they just felt like flexing their muscles a bit, Sam got ready to blow up the dynamite. It was well within range of causing serious damage, unto death, I'm sure, to this Britannian woman who had been detained. But David started off by attacking one of the guards. Sam's character attacked one of the enemies, one of the hostiles, I should say, with a hypo that was filled with neurotoxin. Did I mention the neurotoxin? That's right. It was labeled as rat poison. So that guy was paralyzed by the neurotoxin as it started to wear away at his life. Frothing, the man falls, screaming. David's character attacks. The Britannian woman runs for the hills, and all of the hostile soldiers start to open fire. Immediately on the next round, the first actual round outside the surprise round, David and Sam and the Britannian woman all got a higher initiative in terms of the game than all of the hostiles, so the Britannian woman takes off running, Sam triggers the explosives using his Mage Hand spell to lift up the detonator and trigger it as a goat sorcerer does, because he doesn't have hands. And detonates the 5 sticks of dynamite remotely. Kaboom! A couple of the hostiles go down. A handful of them take serious damage as the bundle of dynamite explodes nearby. The Britannian woman will probably never be seen again, but at least she didn't die in an explosion or get captured and turned into a sex slave. So there's that. Now, Sam and David are facing down roughly a dozen hostile natives, and they really didn't have many issues in the combat. Sam's character is a monster with a monstrous armor class, the ability to just shrug off all kinds of damage because he's a dire goat homunculus sorcerer. Mostly the dire goat homunculus stuff, less of the sorcerer when it comes to his defensive abilities. I still haven't talked him into picking up the shield spell, and mage armor also would be just ridiculous for him, but he's got other plans. And I kind of like where he's going with his character, so maybe I should shut up about those. But seriously, it's like +8 to your armor class. It's pretty insane between mage armor and shield, but I digress. David's character, a monk, pretty good armor class, fantastic dodge, and ability to not get hit as the enemies open up with their black powder rifles, a simple firearm, but effective, and yet they take quite a long time to reload. The enemies fire off a volley of shots, 1 or 2 hit, they deal a little bit of damage, and then Sam and David's character just start ripping people to pieces with their, well, hooves, bare hands, any number of horrible deaths. And Sam went out of his way to be brutal. At one time, tearing out the throat of an enemy soldier and swallowing. Getting a bit of a taste for human flesh. We'll see where that goes. You know what? I think they might be the bad guys. So these homunculi are by definition soulless, and we'll see where they take things. I'm thinking this campaign will be called The End of Man, so we'll see where that goes, and that is a double entendre, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. For now, there's been a slaughter of 15 of the local warlords' fighting men. A checkpoint has been shut down aggressively, and a goat and a captain of the signal corps with their chauffeur Hakim, the NPC, carry on down the road. Catch you guys next week. Bye-bye.